The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens as William stood by the window, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The weight of the envelope on his desk seemed to pull at his thoughts like gravity. Inside was the official letter. That would change everything. His deployment orders for a 6-month military mission overseas. He had known this day would come, but knowing and accepting were two different things entirely. Kate was still sleeping upstairs, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like silk. They had been married for just 2 years, and every morning he still marveled at waking up next to her. The early days of their marriage had been a whirlwind of royal duties, public appearances, and stolen moments of privacy. Now, just as they were finding their rhythm as a couple, duty was calling him away. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times, its deep notes echoing through the quiet house. William knew he had to tell her today. The mission briefing was scheduled for tomorrow, and he couldn't bear the thought of Kate finding out from anyone else. Their relationship had always been built on honesty, even when the truth was difficult to share. He remembered their first real conversation about his military career, years before they were married. They had been walking through a park in Scotland, their security detail keeping a respectful distance. Kate had asked him directly if he would ever have to leave for dangerous missions. He had been honest then. Yes, it was possible. She had nodded thoughtfully and said she understood that loving him meant accepting all parts of his life, including the difficult ones. But understanding something in theory and living it in reality were vastly different experiences. The past few months had been the happiest of William's life. He and Kate had settled into a comfortable routine of official duties mixed with quiet evenings at home. They would cook dinner together, with Kate laughing at his attempts to follow recipes and William marveling at how she could make even the simplest meals taste extraordinary. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted his thoughts. Kate appeared in the doorway wearing one of his old sweaters over her pajamas. Her hair was tousled from sleep, and she looked younger than her years. She smiled when she saw him. That warm smile that had first captured his heart at university. "You're up early," she said, patting across the room to kiss his cheek. "Everything all right?" William felt his heart clench. How could he tell her that their peaceful morning routine was about to be disrupted for half a year? How could he explain that duty was calling him to a place where letters and phone calls would be their only connection? "Kate, we need to talk," he said softly, setting down his coffee cup. Something in his tone made her pause. She had always been intuitive, able to read his moods even when he tried to hide them. Her smile faded slightly as she searched his face. "Is it about the military?" she asked quietly. He nodded, unable to trust his voice for a moment. Kate moved to sit beside him on the small sofa by the window. She didn't ask for details immediately. Instead, she simply took his hand in hers. Her fingers were warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of emotions he was feeling. "Where are you going?" she asked finally. "I can't give you all the details yet, but it's overseas. 6 months, possibly longer depending on the situation." The words felt heavy coming out of his mouth. Kate was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. When she spoke again, her voice was steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "When do you leave?" 3 weeks. The timeline hit her like a physical blow. 3 weeks to prepare for 6 months apart. 3 weeks to store up enough memories and conversations to last through the long separation ahead. "Will you be safe?" she asked, though they both knew he couldn't promise that. "I'll be as safe as anyone can be in that situation. I'll have good people with me and I'll follow every protocol." It wasn't really an answer, but it was all he could give her. Kate stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where they had spent so many peaceful mornings. William watched her shoulders rise and fall as she took deep breaths, composing herself. When she turned back to him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her expression was resolute. "Then we'll make these 3 weeks count," she said simply. In that moment, William fell in love with her all over again. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was kind, though she had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. He fell in love with her strength, with her ability to face difficult situations with grace and determination, They spent the rest of the morning making plans. Kate suggested they should spend as much time as possible, just the two of them, away from official duties when possible. William agreed, knowing that the palace would understand the need for some personal time before his deployment. As the day wore on, the weight of their impending separation settled over them like a gentle but persistent shadow. Every shared glance, every casual touch, every laugh at a silly joke took on new significance. They were already beginning the process of storing up moments to sustain them through the months ahead. That evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from their private garden, Kate leaned against William's shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly, "and I'm scared. But mostly, I'm proud." William wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Tomorrow would bring the reality of preparations and briefings. But tonight they were just William and Kate, holding on to each other and the precious time they had left before duty called him away. The military briefing room felt cold and sterile compared to the warmth of home William had left behind that morning. Charts covered the walls showing terrain maps and operational details that he studied with growing seriousness. The mission was more complex than he had initially understood, involving coordination with international forces in a region experiencing significant unrest. Colonel Harrison, a weathered man with kind eyes, led the briefing with the efficiency of someone who had delivered similar presentations many times before. As he spoke about timelines, objectives, and communication protocols, William's mind kept drifting to Kate. She had insisted on making him breakfast that morning, standing at the stove in her robe, humming softly as she prepared his favorite meal. Such simple moments had become precious beyond measure. "Flight Lieutenant Wales." Colonel Harrison's voice brought him back to the present. "Do you have any questions about the communication schedule?" William straightened in his chair. "Yes, sir. How reliable will the video call connections be?" "Generally good, though there may be periods of limited contact due to operational security requirements. Your family will be informed if there are any extended communication blackouts." The word blackout sent a chill through William. The thought of Kate waiting by the phone, not knowing if he was safe, was almost unbearable. He made a mental note to discuss this with her, to prepare her for the possibility of silent periods. After the briefing, William drove home through London traffic, his mind heavy with new information. The city bustled around him with its usual energy, people going about their daily lives, unaware that in 3 weeks, one of their future kings would be thousands of miles away in a very different world. When he arrived home, he found Kate in their study surrounded by books and papers. She looked up as he entered, and he could see she had been crying, though she quickly composed herself. "How was the briefing?" she asked, closing the book she had been reading. William sat down beside her, noticing the stack of military wives' support group materials on the desk. His heart swelled with both love and guilt, love for her thoughtfulness in preparing herself for his absence, and guilt for putting her in this position. "It's real now," he said simply. "The mission is important, but it's also dangerous. I need you to know that." Kate nodded, her fingers fidgeting with her wedding ring. "I've been reading about other military families. There are support networks, other wives going through the same thing. You don't have to carry this alone," William said, taking her hand. "There are people who understand." Over the following days, they fell into a different rhythm. Their time together became more intentional, each moment savored rather than simply lived. They took long walks through their favorite parks, had quiet dinners at small restaurants where they could talk without interruption, and spent hours simply holding each other while watching movies they would both forget. Kate began the practical preparations with characteristic organization. She researched time zones to understand when they might be able to talk. She arranged her own schedule to accommodate potential calls at odd hours. She even learned about the basics of military communication systems, so she could better understand any limitations they might face. William, meanwhile, tried to prepare himself mentally for being away from her. His previous deployments had been before their marriage, when he was responsible only for himself. Now the thought of Kate going to bed alone, of her facing challenges without his support, of missing important moments in their lives together, weighed heavily on his mind. One evening, as they were having dinner in their private dining room, Kate brought up something that had been troubling her. "What if something happens to you?" she asked quietly. not looking up from her plate. William reached across the table and took her hand. "Kate, look at me." When she finally met his eyes, he could see the fear she had been trying to hide. "I can't promise nothing will happen," he said honestly. "But I can promise that I'll be careful. I'll follow every safety protocol, and I'll come back to you." "How can you promise that?" she asked, tears beginning to flow. "Because I have too much to live for now. Before you, I was just doing my duty. Now I have a reason to make sure I come home safely." They talked late into the night about their fears, their hopes, and their plans for staying connected during the separation. Kate had already started writing letters that she planned to send regularly, even though email and video calls would be their primary communication. She said there was something special about handwritten words that made them feel more personal. William suggested they establish certain traditions to help bridge the distance. They would read the same book at the same time, so they could discuss it during their calls. They would watch the same television series, coordinating their viewing schedules across time zones, small ways to share experiences even when apart. As the days passed, their friends and family began to understand the magnitude of the upcoming separation. William's father offered support and shared his own experiences with military duty. Kate's family rallied around her, making plans to visit regularly during William's absence. The palace staff, too, seemed to sense the emotional weight of the situation. They became even more discreet and respectful, giving the couple as much privacy as possible during their remaining time together. 1 week before his departure, William and Kate had a long conversation about communication during the mission. They established a schedule for calls, understanding it might need to be flexible based on his duties and time zone differences. They discussed what she should do if she didn't hear from him for extended periods, and how she would be contacted if there were any emergencies. "I want you to live your life while I'm gone," William told her. "Don't put everything on hold waiting for me to call." "But I'll miss you every moment you're gone," Kate replied. "I'll miss you too. But we both need to stay strong, and that means taking care of ourselves and continuing to grow, even while we're apart." As they prepared for bed that night, the countdown to his departure feeling more real with each passing day, they held each other close, neither wanting to fall asleep and lose precious waking moments together. The final week arrived with unexpected speed, each day seeming to slip away before they could fully grasp it. William found himself memorizing small details about Kate, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the sound of her laugh echoing through their home, the feel of her hand in his during their evening walks. Kate had become quieter as the departure date approached, though she tried to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor. William caught her sometimes staring at nothing, lost in thought, and he knew she was already practicing living without his constant presence. The strength she was showing made his heart ache with both pride and sorrow. 3 days before his departure, they received an unexpected visit from William's grandmother. She arrived for tea with her usual understated elegance, but William could see the concern in her eyes. She had lived through many military separations during her long life and understood the emotional toll they could take. "I wanted to speak with you both," she said, as they sat in the garden, her voice carrying the wisdom of decades. "Military service is an honor, but it's also a sacrifice that both of you will make." "Not just William," Kate nodded, grateful for the acknowledgement that she, too, would be serving in her own way. "The key," his grandmother continued, "is to remember that this separation is temporary, but your love and commitment to each other is permanent. Hold on to that during the difficult moments." After she left, Kate and William sat in companionable silence, processing her words. The evening air was warm, and the garden was filled with the sounds of birds settling in for the night. It was a peaceful moment that they both tried to imprint on their memories. 2 days before his departure, Kate surprised William with a special dinner she had prepared entirely by herself. She had spent weeks secretly learning to cook his favorite meal from his childhood, a dish his mother used to make. The gesture was so thoughtful and loving that William had to excuse himself for a moment to compose himself. "You didn't have to do this," he said when he returned to find her waiting anxiously for his reaction. "Wanted to give you something special to remember," she said simply. "Something that's just from me to you." The meal was perfect, but more than that, it was made with love. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and each other's company, talking about their favorite memories from their relationship and their hopes for the future. The night before his departure, Neither of them slept well. They lay in bed talking in whispers about everything and nothing, reluctant to waste time sleeping. Kate had prepared a care package for him to take, photos of them together, letters to open on difficult days, and small mementos from their life together. "I have something for you too," William said, reaching into his bedside drawer. He pulled out a small jewelry box. "I know it's not a special occasion, but I wanted you to have this." Inside was a delicate necklace with a pendant that matched her engagement ring. It was beautiful, but more importantly, it was something he had chosen just for her. "It's so you'll always have a piece of our story with you," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. Kate touched the pendant gently, tears in her eyes. "I'll wear it every day until you come home." The morning of his departure dawned gray and drizzly, matching their somber moods. William's military transport would pick him up at noon, giving them a few final hours together. They had breakfast in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Kate had dressed carefully that morning, wanting to look strong and beautiful for their goodbye. She wore the dress William had told her was his favorite, and the new necklace gleamed at her throat. William, in his military uniform, looked every inch the officer he was, but Kate could see the husband beneath the formal exterior. At 11:30, William's bags were loaded and waiting by the door. They stood in their living room, the same room where they had shared so many peaceful mornings, now filled with the weight of impending separation. "I love you," William said, pulling Kate into his arms. "That's not going to change no matter how far apart we are." "I love you too," Kate whispered against his chest. "Come back to me safely." They held each other tightly, neither wanting to be the first to let go. The sound of vehicles approaching announced that his transport had arrived. William kissed Kate one final time, long and tender, trying to memorize the feeling. As they walked to the door together, Kate's composure finally began to crack. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she kept her head high. She was determined to send him off with strength, not sorrow. The military personnel waiting outside were respectful and efficient, loading William's remaining gear quickly. William shook hands with his security detail and the household staff who had gathered to see him off. Each farewell was brief but meaningful. Finally, it was time for the last goodbye. William turned back to Kate one final time. She stood in the doorway of their home, beautiful and brave, though tears streamed down her face. "I'll call you as soon as I can," he promised. Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched as he climbed into the vehicle, her hand pressed to her heart. As the convoy pulled away, William looked back through the rear window until their home disappeared from view. Kate remained in the doorway long after the vehicles had gone, one hand clutching the pendant at her throat, the other wiping away tears that wouldn't stop coming. The house behind her felt suddenly too quiet, too empty, but she straightened her shoulders and went back inside, beginning the long journey of learning to live with half her heart thousands of miles away. The first phone call came 18 hours after William's departure. Kate had been sitting by the phone for most of that time, trying to read but unable to concentrate on anything except the silence. When it finally rang, she answered before the first ring finished. "Kate?" William's voice crackled through the international connection, and she closed her eyes in relief just hearing his familiar tone. "I'm here," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "How was the journey?" "Long and exhausting, but I'm safe. I'm at the base now, getting settled in." He sounded tired but alert. "I miss you already." "I miss you too. The house feels so quiet without you." They talked for 20 minutes, sharing details about his journey and her first day alone. The conversation felt both natural and strange. Natural because they had always talked easily together. Strange because of the thousands of miles and multiple time zones between them. "I have to go soon," William said reluctantly. "There's a briefing in a few minutes, but I wanted to hear your voice." "Call me whenever you can," Kate said. "I'll always answer." After they hung up, Kate felt both better and worse. Better because she knew he was safe. Worse because hearing his voice made his absence feel even more real. She walked through their home, touching things that belonged to him, already beginning the process of learning to live with longing. The next few weeks established their new routine. William would call when his schedule allowed, sometimes during Kate's morning, sometimes late at her night. She kept her phone close at all times, never wanting to miss his voice. Their conversations became a lifeline for both of them. William sharing what he could about his daily life, Kate updating him on news from home. Kate threw herself into her royal duties with new intensity. She increased her charity work, taking on additional engagements and spending extra time with the organization she supported. The work helped fill the empty hours and gave her a sense of purpose beyond simply waiting for William's calls. 1 month into his deployment, Kate received her first letter from William. It arrived on a particularly difficult day, when she had been fighting tears all morning for no specific reason except missing him. The envelope, addressed in his familiar handwriting, felt like a gift. His letter was 5 pages long, filled with details about his daily life that he couldn't share over the phone due to security restrictions. He wrote about the landscape, his fellow soldiers, the small routines that marked his days. But mostly, he wrote about missing her and counting the days until he could come home. "I carry your photo with me everywhere," he wrote. "The other guys tease me about it, but I don't care. You're my anchor here, keeping me grounded and focused on what's important." Kate read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in the special box she had designated for his correspondence. That evening, she wrote her own letter back, filling pages with news from home, stories about their friends, and her own declarations of love and longing. As weeks turned into months, their separation began to affect them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Kate found herself becoming more independent, making decisions she would have normally discussed with William first. She was growing into her role as a solo representative of their partnership, attending events and managing their shared responsibilities with new confidence. William, meanwhile, was discovering leadership qualities he hadn't known he possessed. The responsibility for his team and the serious nature of their mission was changing him, deepening his sense of duty and purpose. His letters began to reflect this growth, showing Kate glimpses of the man he was becoming through this experience. Their phone calls evolved too. The desperate need to hear each other's voices that marked the early weeks gradually gave way to more comfortable conversations. They began to share their individual growth with each other, discussing how the separation was changing them both. "I'm proud of you," William told her during one call. "I hear about the work you're doing, how you're handling everything. You're stronger than either of us knew." "I had to be," Kate replied. "I couldn't fall apart just because you're not here. But I'm proud of you too. You sound different now, more sure of yourself. This mission is teaching me things about leadership I couldn't learn any other way," William admitted. "It's hard, but it's important." 3 months into his deployment, Kate faced her first real crisis alone. A family emergency required immediate attention, and for the first time since William left, she desperately wished he could be there to support her. Instead, she had to handle everything herself while he was thousands of miles away and unreachable due to a communication blackout. When William finally called 2 days later, Kate had already managed the crisis and was dealing with the emotional aftermath. "I should have been there," he said when she told him what had happened. "But you weren't, and I handled it," Kate replied. "I'm not the same person who said goodbye to you 3 months ago, William. I'm stronger now." He could hear the truth in her voice. She had grown through this trial, becoming more self-reliant and confident. While he was proud of her strength, he also felt a pang of sadness that she had had to develop it without him. Their conversations began to include discussions of how their relationship would change when he returned. They were both different people now, shaped by months of separation and individual growth. They would need to rediscover each other and build their partnership anew. "When I come home," William said during one call, "we're going to need time to get to know each other again." "I know," Kate agreed, "but I'm not worried about that. Our love is strong enough to grow with us." As the 4th month of his deployment began, they both felt the weight of the time they had spent apart, but also a growing excitement about his eventual return. The end was finally visible on the horizon, even if it still felt far away. They had survived the hardest part, learning to love each other across the distance. Now they just had to learn to be together again. The 4th month brought unexpected challenges that tested both William and Kate in ways they hadn't anticipated. William's mission suddenly became more complex, requiring longer hours and more dangerous operations. The stress showed in his voice during their calls, though he tried to hide it from Kate. Kate, meanwhile, had thrown herself so completely into her royal duties that she was exhausting herself. Friends and family began to worry about her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes and the weight she had lost. She was functioning at a high level professionally, but personally, she was struggling more than she let on. During one late-night call, their conversation took an unexpected turn. William could hear the strain in Kate's voice, and she could sense his tension even through the poor connection. "You sound tired," Kate said softly. "We both sound tired," William replied. "How are you really doing, Kate? Not the version you give everyone else, Hugh. How are you really?" There was a long pause before Kate answered. "I'm lonely," she admitted. "I keep busy, but when I stop moving, when everything gets quiet, I feel so alone. Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for this life." William's heart ached hearing the vulnerability in her voice. "You are strong enough. You're the strongest person I know, but you don't have to carry everything by yourself. I miss having you to talk to about the little things," Kate continued. "I miss sharing normal moments with you. These phone calls are precious, but they're not enough to fill the space you left behind." William was quiet for a moment, dealing with his own wave of emotion. "I know, I feel the same way. Sometimes I wonder if the price we're paying for this service is too high." It was the first time either of them had expressed doubt about his deployment, and the honesty was both painful and liberating. They talked for an hour that night, sharing fears and frustrations they had been keeping to themselves. The next week brought news that changed everything. William's mission was being extended by 2 months due to evolving circumstances in the region. When he called to tell Kate, she was quiet for so long that he thought the connection had been lost. "Kate."
"Are you there?"
"I'm here," she said finally, her voice small. "2 more months. I'm so sorry. I know this isn't what we planned." Kate sat in their empty living room, staring at the calendar on the wall where she had been marking off days until his return. 2 more months felt like an eternity. "We'll get through this," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "We have to." The news of the extension hit Kate harder than she expected. She found herself crying at unexpected moments, struggling to maintain the composed public face she had worked so hard to perfect. Her family rallied around her, offering support and understanding, but nothing could fill the William-shaped hole in her life. William, too, was struggling with the extension. The mission had become more demanding, and the knowledge that he was causing Kate additional pain made everything harder. His letters became more frequent but shorter, as he tried to balance his duties with staying connected to home. One evening, about a week after learning about the extension, Kate made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She requested a private meeting with William's commanding officer to better understand his mission and the reasons for the extension. The meeting was arranged through proper channels, and Kate found herself sitting across from Colonel Harrison via video call. She had dressed formally for the occasion, but her questions came from the heart. "I need to understand why this extension is necessary," she said directly. "Not just the official reasons, but the real importance of what my husband is doing there." Colonel Harrison was impressed by her directness and gave her a thorough briefing about the mission's significance. Understanding the broader context helped Kate process her own sacrifice differently. She wasn't just missing her husband, she was contributing to something important that was bigger than both of them. "Your husband is making a real difference here," the colonel told her, "and your support of him is part of that service." After the call, Kate felt a shift in her perspective. The separation was still painful, but it now felt purposeful in a way it hadn't before. She was serving her country too, just in a different way. She channeled this new understanding into her public duties, speaking more openly about military families and the sacrifices they make. Her authenticity resonated with the public, and she began receiving letters from other military spouses who felt seen and understood by her words. Meanwhile, William was finding his own ways to cope with the extended separation. He had formed strong bonds with his fellow servicemen, who had become like brothers to him. They supported each other through the difficult moments and celebrated the small victories together. One of his fellow officers, a man named James who had been through multiple deployments, became a particular source of wisdom. During a quiet moment between operations, James shared his own perspective on military marriages. "The couples who make it through these separations don't just survive them, they use them to grow stronger," James told William. "You and Kate are going through something that will either break you or forge you into something unbreakable." William thought about those words often in the following weeks. He could see that both he and Kate were being changed by this experience, and he chose to believe they were being forged rather than broken. Their communication patterns evolved again during this period. They began having longer, deeper conversations less frequently, using their limited talk time for more meaningful exchanges. They discussed their fears, their growth, their hopes for the future, and their commitment to each other. "When I come home," William said during one of these calls, "I want us to take time to really reconnect. Not just pick up where we left off, but discover who we've become." "I'd like that," Kate agreed. "I think we'll both be surprised by the people we've grown into." As the 5th month of his deployment drew to a close, they both felt different than they had at the beginning. The eager couple who had said goodbye was becoming something deeper, more resilient, forged by distance and tested by time. The 6th month brought an unexpected turn of events that would test everything William and Kate had learned about strength, love, and commitment. News reports began surfacing about increased danger in William's deployment zone, and while official statements remained optimistic, Kate could read between the lines. Her husband was in more danger than ever before. For 3 days she heard nothing. No calls, no messages, complete silence from the military communication channels. Kate found herself checking her phone obsessively, jumping at every sound, unable to sleep or eat properly. The palace staff watched her with growing concern, but there was nothing anyone could do except wait. On the 4th day, Kate's phone rang at 2 in the morning. She answered immediately, her heart pounding. "Kate, it's Colonel Harrison." The serious tone in his voice made her stomach drop. "I wanted to call you personally to let you know that William is safe, but there was an incident during their mission." Kate's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair. "What kind of incident?" "I can't give you all the details over the phone, but his unit came under fire during an operation. William was injured, but not seriously. He's being treated at the base medical facility." The words "William was injured" echoed in Kate's mind, drowning out everything else the colonel was saying. Her worst fears were becoming reality. "Can I talk to him?" she managed to ask. "He's sedated right now, but he specifically asked me to call you and tell you he's okay. He said to tell you he's thinking about you and he'll call as soon as he's able." After hanging up, Kate sat in her dark living room, shaking. The house felt enormous and empty around her. For the first time since William left, she truly understood how fragile their situation was, how quickly everything could change. She called her mother, who arrived within an hour, and simply held her while she cried. No words were needed, just the comfort of not being alone with her fear. 24 hours later, William finally called. His voice was hoarse and tired, but it was unmistakably him. "I'm okay," were his first words. "I know you're scared, but I'm okay." Kate couldn't stop crying long enough to respond properly. Hearing his voice after thinking she might never hear it again overwhelmed her with relief and renewed fear. "Don't ever scare me like that again," she finally managed to say. "I didn't exactly plan it," William replied with a weak attempt at humor. "But Kate, I need you to know something. When everything was happening, when things got dangerous, all I could think about was getting back to you. You're what kept me focused, what kept me safe." They talked for an hour, with William sharing what he could about the incident and Kate telling him about the terrifying days of silence. The conversation was different from all their previous calls, more urgent, more honest, stripped of any pretense. "I don't want to lose you," Kate said simply. "You won't," William promised. "I'm coming home to you." The incident changed something fundamental in their relationship. The theoretical possibility of loss had become frighteningly real, and both of them felt the preciousness of their connection more deeply than ever before. Kate's public appearances over the following weeks took on a new quality. She spoke with military families with an authenticity born from her own recent fear. When she visited wounded servicemen and their families, she understood their experiences in a way she hadn't before. Her empathy was no longer theoretical. It was earned through her own sleepless nights and moments of terror. William, recovering from his minor injuries, found himself reflecting deeply on the purpose and cost of his service. The mission was important, but so was his life with Kate. He began to think seriously about his future in the military and what kind of life he wanted to build with his wife. During their next call, he brought up these thoughts carefully. "Kate, I've been thinking about what happens when this deployment ends. Not just coming home, but what comes after that." "What do you mean?" Kate asked. "I mean whether this kind of deployment should be part of our future. Whether the risk is worth it, whether it's fair to put you through this again. Kate was quiet for a long moment. That's not a decision you should make based on my fears, she said finally. It's not just about your fears. It's about what kind of life we want together. I joined the military before I truly understood what it meant to have someone to come home to. They agreed to discuss it more thoroughly when he returned, but the conversation marked a turning point in how they both thought about their future. The deployment had changed them individually and as a couple, and those changes would influence every decision they made going forward. As William's final month began, both he and Kate felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the end was finally near, anxiety about reconnecting after so much time apart, and a deep gratitude for having survived the separation with their love intact. Kate began preparing for his return with the same careful attention she had given to his departure. She wanted everything to be perfect, but she also knew they would both need time to adjust to being together again. William, meanwhile, was already beginning the process of mentally preparing to leave his team and return to civilian life. The bonds he had formed with his fellow servicemen were strong, and leaving them behind would be its own kind of grief. 1 more month, he told Kate during their call. 1 more month, she agreed, touching the pendant at her throat that she had worn every day since he left. They had both been changed by the experience of separation, tested by distance and danger, and strengthened by the knowledge that their love could survive anything. The couple who would reunite would be different from the one who had said goodbye, but they would be stronger, deeper, and more committed than ever before. The final week of William's deployment arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness that surprised them both. After 8 months of longing for this moment, Kate found herself anxious about their reunion. Would they feel like strangers? Had they changed too much? Would they still fit together the way they once had? William was experiencing similar uncertainties. During his last few days on base, he caught himself studying recent photos of Kate, trying to reconcile the woman in the pictures with his memories. She looked different, stronger, more confident, but also more serious. He wondered if he looked different to her, too. Having second thoughts about going home? Asked James, his fellow officer, noticing William's thoughtful mood. Not second thoughts, William replied. Just wondering if home will feel the same. It won't, James said matter-of-factly. Nothing ever feels the same after a deployment like this, but that doesn't mean it won't be better. Kate spent the final days before William's return in a flurry of preparation. She had their house cleaned until it sparkled, filled it with fresh flowers, and planned his favorite meals. But beneath the busy activity, she was nervous. She had grown so accustomed to independence, to making decisions alone, to filling her time without consideration for anyone else's schedule. How would they blend their lives back together? 2 days before his scheduled return, William called with news that his transport had been delayed by weather. Instead of arriving on Tuesday, he wouldn't be home until Thursday evening. I'm sorry, he said, hearing the disappointment in Kate's voice. I know you've been counting down the days. It's just 2 more days, Kate said, trying to sound cheerful. What's 2 more days after 8 months? But privately, those extra 2 days felt enormous. She had been holding her breath, preparing herself emotionally for his return, and now she had to maintain that state of readiness for longer than expected. When Thursday finally arrived, Kate found herself changing clothes 3 times, unable to decide what to wear. She wanted to look beautiful for him, but she also wanted to be comfortable, to be herself. In the end, she chose a simple blue dress, one he had always loved, and the necklace he had given her before leaving. The palace had offered to arrange an official welcome ceremony, but William had requested privacy for their reunion. This moment belonged to them alone, not to the public or the press. Kate arrived at the airfield an hour early, unable to sit still at home any longer. She watched other families waiting for their loved ones, recognizing the same mixture of excitement and nervousness in their faces. When the transport plane finally appeared in the distance, her heart began racing. The plane landed with a rumble that she felt in her chest. As servicemen began emerging, Kate scanned each face, looking for the one that had been absent from her life for so long. When she finally saw William walking down the steps, she hardly recognized him at first. He was thinner, more serious-looking, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when their eyes met across the tarmac, his face broke into the familiar smile that had captured her heart years ago. They moved toward each other slowly at first, then faster, until Kate was running across the pavement. William dropped his bag and opened his arms, catching her as she threw herself against him. They held each other tightly, both crying, neither caring who might be watching. "You're here," Kate whispered against his neck. "You're really here." "I'm home," William replied, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I'm finally home." They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, both afraid that if they let go, the moment might prove to be a dream. When they finally pulled apart enough to look at each other, Kate traced the new lines on William's face with her fingertips. "You look different," she said softly. "So do you," he replied. "You look stronger." They drove home together in comfortable silence, William's hand resting on Kate's knee, both of them stealing glances at each other when they thought the other wasn't looking. The familiar landscape of their route home seemed new somehow, as if William was seeing everything with fresh eyes. When they arrived at their house, Kate felt suddenly shy. This place had been her sanctuary during his absence, the space where she had learned to be alone. Now she had to share it again, to make room for another person's needs and rhythms. "It looks exactly the same," William said as they walked through the front door. "I wanted it to be ready for you," Kate replied. "I wanted everything to be perfect." "It is perfect," William said, turning to face her in their living room. "But Kate, you know we're going to need time to figure this out again, right? We're both different people than we were 8 months ago." Kate nodded, relief flooding through her that he had acknowledged what they were both feeling. "I've been worried about that. I've gotten so used to being on my own, making all my own decisions. And I've gotten used to military life, to constant structure and routine. We're going to have to learn how to be us again." They spent their first evening together quietly, sharing a simple dinner and talking about everything and nothing. They discussed practical matters, how their schedules would work, which responsibilities they would share again, and emotional ones, how the separation had changed them and what they had learned about themselves. Later that night, as they prepared for bed together for the first time in 8 months, Kate felt nervous again. Even the simple act of brushing their teeth side by side felt both familiar and strange. "This is weird, isn't it?" William said, catching her eye in the bathroom mirror. "A little," Kate admitted, laughing with relief that he felt it too. "We'll figure it out," William said, taking her hand. "We have all the time in the world now." As they lay in bed together, Kate curled against William's side. They both realized that coming home wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. They had survived the test of separation, grown individually, and proven that their love could withstand distance and danger. Now they faced the equally important challenge of building a new version of their relationship, one that honored both who they had been and who they had become. "I love you," Kate whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," William replied, holding her close. "Welcome home to both of us." Outside their window, the world continued on, unaware that a love story that had captured a nation's heart was beginning its next chapter. The goodbye that had moved everyone was now a reunion that promised an even stronger future together.